we're going to talk all about business and entrepreneurship. Today, we are going to speak with Vanessa Shaw on how to turn your entrepreneurial dreams into a reality. And for those who don't know Vanessa is a highly accredited and internationally recognized business success coach. She's a sought-after speaker on business leadership and income strategies, and she leverages years of experience having worked with hundreds of clients in major firms. Her experience as an international coach has led Vanessa to her passion for coaching and mentoring small business owners and entrepreneurs. Whether you are seeking more income, making a bigger impact, or enjoying greater freedom, Vanessa and her dedicated team of professionals at the Business Growth Academy can help turn your entrepreneurial dreams into reality. Vanessa, I'm excited to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I had a long list of things I wanted to talk with you about, like a lot of things. And I said, okay, so we got to condense this into an hour. What are we going to condense this into? So I dove deep into your work and I thought, well, Vanessa talks about these things a lot. So I wanted to go into some areas you don't talk about a lot and also some that you talk about all the time. And I guess the first question I have for you is, I see everywhere this $1 million question. It's on your site. You talk about it and it's a big part of the work that you do. So what is this $1 million question?
Great place to start, Brandon. So, and kind of backtrack into it is very much around realizing that as we want to grow our business, right? As you say, turn those dreams into reality. And we've all got dreams and we've all got things that we put on the back burner and that we'd really love to be doing. And there are things that block us, right, from getting there. And for me, most of the blocks are actually internal blocks. They're actually not real blocks out there in the environment. And I started to look at this years ago and realized that, we don't get what we want when we're going after the pursuit of our dreams and our goals. We will get what we tolerate. And that is really the foundation of the $1 million question. And the reason that it's called the $1 million question, or it could be frankly called the $10 million question as well, is I was asking this question at a live event in an old, former business model, former version of me in the business. We used to run, big live events with 150 people in a room for 3 days working on their business and their mindset. And I asked this question from the front of the room, and a woman who's actually a top doctor here in Phoenix came up to me and she said, "Oh my gosh, I have just worked through that process that you gave me literally on a piece of paper." And she was like, "There is $1 million sitting in my practice of untapped potential because I am tolerating not making a decision that I've wanted to make for a long time." Right? And I was like, I know, right? It works. And she's like, "I need to hire you because I want the $1 million back in the practice." Right? So I was like, okay, well, I guess that worked. And, we worked together. And in that particular case, and I actually tell the story of that in the book, but in that particular case, this was a doctor, and this applies really and truly to most people's service-based businesses. She knew that she could be serving her clients, her patients in this case, in a higher way. She's a doctor. She's committed to massive breakthroughs around health. She's actually practices functional medicine, which is all about looking at root cause and not just prescribing medication. And the insurance system very much doesn't align with being able to do deeper transformative healthcare work, right? It's like she's in a system that is competing with the very results and the care that she wants to provide. And the decision that she was, tolerating, let's say not making, was about moving over to a fully concierge style practice and moving away from that insurance-based practice. And again, I get it, right? It's a big decision. And oftentimes when we tap into that toleration, we've got the toleration, but then underneath the toleration, and this is where a lot of the work really needs to happen, is the stories that we tell ourselves about the toleration, right? It's like, I've got the decision, but like, what are the stories that I'm now telling myself around tolerating the not making the decision in this case? And that's going to reveal a whole lot of limiting beliefs, real valid concerns as well. I mean, it's not always going to be just pure mindset. And once we start to unpack those, we can strategize. You know, in this particular case, there were real valid concerns around, you know, what will my peers say? You know, doctors also get very vocal with other peers around how they're practicing and new decisions they're making. And those are, you know, those are going to be some of the real backlash that we might experience as we make a big shift. And we have to make decisions around, am I going to build my practice based off of what my peers want me to do? Or am I going to build my practice after, you know, based on my own dreams and desires for what I want to put in the world? And ultimately, that is what happened. And yes, $1 million went back into the practice where it needed to be. And she's a lot happier as a result.
That's incredible. It's just amazing to me how one question can cause such a breakthrough in somebody's business or somebody's life. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the quote, the quality of the questions we ask determines the quality of our life, personally and professionally. And one thing I'd like to ask you is, when you ask other entrepreneurs and just other people that you work with this same question, what are some other like common examples of tolerances that we have when it comes to our business and our life? Like what are the most common things that you're seeing when it comes to that?
I know, it's true. I do find that on the whole, there's surface level tolerations that people are aware of, and they're totally valid as well, right? Often we start there, we can get that awareness with, yeah, it's true, I'm tolerating this. And I'll certainly give examples. But I do want the listeners to know that digging deeper, there's often tolerations that we're not even aware of, right? They're outside of our conscious awareness. And those ones are often the more important ones to unleash, because for me, those are ones that, you know, we've inherited. They're part of what I'll refer to as generational programming. You know, we just think it's the way it needs to be. We've come from a family, perhaps perhaps it's a family of other business owners that have done things in a certain way. I have an example there of a client who actually took on her business from her father and didn't realize for years that she was tolerating doing things the way her father had always done things. And she'd grown up with a certain mindset. So we had to completely shift that. So surface level, and then those deeper ones. And those deeper ones are really the ones that shift paradigms and really set us free. But let me give you a few examples of kind of the classics. Tolerating working with less than ideal clients. I mean, that's a classic. You know, I'll ask people let's look at the types of clients that you're working with, and the ones that are a real joy to work with, and then the ones that frankly are really draining, and they're very demanding, and they don't get the results, and they need too much hand holding. And frankly, if you've got a team, they're very draining. Even your team is kind of like, we have to deal with them again, right? That's a classic. And yet in business, clients are everything. Like, clients are the oxygen and the life and the blood of our business. So that's a massive toleration. And then, you know, what are some of the stories that we then tell ourselves around that? Well, I have to take those clients on because I need the money. The story is, I don't know how to get better clients, or there aren't better clients that would pay more for our services. You know, they don't exist. So lots of stories like that. I'm in the business, a lot of our clients are scaling up from 6 figures to multi-6 and 7 figures. That's a place where we need team, right? We need people around us, and team, whether that's employees or independent contractors that are going to support us. But there's massive, tolerations around the quality of people that we have supporting us. You know, so I'm tolerating less than ideal performance. I'm tolerating not knowing exactly what my team members are even working on. And all of those things have solutions. So those are some very classics. The big one that I see, which is, really digs down very, very deeply into kind of the core work that we do, is tolerating stuff around money. So when I say stuff, there's a lot of not earning enough, not knowing the numbers, not paying ourselves. This is massive, really, especially with women, but still with small business owners as well, not tolerating paying themselves the sort of salary that they really want to be paying themselves. And again, often that toleration, that's when I go into this, there's often that surface level, but a lot deeper in terms of why that's really happening and what's keeping it at bay. So we need to do that work to kind of unlock all of that, so that now turning those dreams into reality and building the plan and actually executing on it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I appreciate you going into all those different things too. And since so much of it is below the surface, I imagine it can be pretty difficult to determine like where you even begin there, especially as that entrepreneur who is at six figures and they want to go to multi six figures or go to 7 or 8 or whatever it might be. I'm sure there's probably a lot of hesitation to change even some of those deeper concerns. So from your perspective, having done this for so long, what does the process look like to help somebody? You meet them, right? You dig into what they do. What's that process look like to really discover those deep rooted concerns and tolerances?
Yeah, so good. Well, first and foremost, I would say, the best clients to work with are the ones that are ready, hungry, and willing to do the work, right? Without those factors, you can dig in all day long, right? But because the reality is I'm in the business of change, and probably a lot of your listeners are too. When we're looking at really changing behaviors, changing outcomes, changing people, we transform people's realities. And I say we in partnership with our clients, right? We're really in the business of creating bigger, better, brighter, bolder futures for the clients that we work with. Well, that requires our clients to show up, as I say, hungry for those bigger results, hungry for change, ready, that they're no longer just, going backwards and forwards and should I and shouldn't I. It's like something is happening inside of them whereby they are seeking a change. And the last part is willing to do the work. Because there is work involved. And I think, again, that is really important for your listeners to hear that. It's like, ask yourself, am I hungry for it? Am I ready? And finally, most important, am I willing to do the work? And the work is going to be the internal change and changing ourselves, transforming who we're being in business as we grow the business, as well as executing the work in our business, right? It's the inside and the outside. So in terms of, really what does that look like? I've obviously done this for so long. I'm in nearly 2 decades. I personally do not follow a hard and fast process with every single client that I work with. I just think we're human beings. We're messy. We can prescribe a process. I can decide that I would like to follow that. But let's face it, the human is going to show up and present all of their stuff and have a conversation, and it will not go in any linear format. But what I'm looking at first is I'm looking at paint the picture of, help me understand where you're at today. What does today look like for you? I'm wanting to get a baseline of what's working, what's not working, right? Really, so I can understand your current reality. If we don't understand where we're starting from, it's really difficult to kind of understand, right, where we want to get to. Then I'm typically going to be looking at 3 years from now. We're meeting, we're having a fantastic conversation, right? And by the way, even that question, sometimes I say 3, sometimes I say 1, because depending on how a client is presenting, if they've just got a lot of stuff that's really got that's going on and a lot of change, thinking in the short term can actually be more helpful. 1 year, we can get our head around. 3 year at times can be too much, right? And all of a sudden they go off into, I don't know, and it's too much. So 3 years from now, we're meeting, we're celebrating your successes. What needs to have changed for you to be deeply happy and proud of your progress, right? So I often call it the champagne question, right? It's like we're celebrating with a bottle of champagne. We're celebrating your wins. What must have happened? Right? This starts to get us into the future. So now I understand I understand their goals. I'm understanding what's really, really important to them, right? And the next place now is we've got to build the roadmap. But in order to build the roadmap, it's like, what's getting in the way, right? And this is often where those tolerations start to really reveal themselves. And I'm already listening through that lens of, tell me, what are some things that you're tolerating? What are obstacles that are in the way? What are shifts and changes that you know that you need to make right now? And new skills and capabilities that you will need to build in order, right, to get to those outcomes. And that already, that process there is going to get a lot out on the table in terms of where we're at, where you want to get to, and okay, what's that territory of some of the stuff in between.
That's amazing. And I love how the common theme of what you're talking about is clarity, clarity of where someone is now, clarity of where somebody wants to go, their short-term goals, their long-term vision. I love the idea of the champagne question. I always ask people, if we're sitting in a coffee shop a year from now and you looked at me and said, Brandon, this has been the greatest year of my life. And I looked at you and I said, well, why has this been the greatest year of your life? What's happened? I ask that question all the time, but I got to say the champagne question sounds a lot cooler for sure.
Yeah. You can steal it. and then you can adapt it as well. If you've got health people that you're speaking to, sometimes I even say, perhaps we're just sharing your green juice.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about you. And I want to talk about, you came from the southern gardeny spot of the United Kingdom, right? And now you're all the way in Arizona practicing leadership and business and entrepreneurship. But I know that wasn't always the case for you. So I know this is a very general question. I'll let you take this wherever you want. But what brought you here doing what you're doing now for the time that you've been doing it?
Right. I mean, and it's such an interesting story. I'm amazed at how many people ask the question that they really want to hear the story. But I'm going to give you, it's a long story, and I'm going to give you kind of the highlights.
Okay.
So, grew up in southern England, Kent. Studied languages at college. Landed a miserable job existence in London. Thought I wanted to follow my kind of big brother's footsteps into the London insurance market. Hated it. I mean, absolutely hated it. Would go in and kind of cry behind the scenes, and got an opportunity to go to Geneva, Switzerland for a 3-month contract to work for the United Nations. And at the time, it was just like, get me out of this misery, anything to get there. I drove myself to Switzerland, having never been there, no signed contract. Landed a job. That's even a whole other story, because I was actually recruited illegally. They wanted to get rid of me. They wanted to send me back to the UK. I kind of begged my way in, and was hired at the lowest levels. I was really punished for that, even though I wasn't my fault, but I now was responsible for dealing with this situation. And anyway, long story short, met my husband several months later there, who we've just celebrated 26 years, by the way. We have 2 kids.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you, because it's a big celebration. And then spent the next 21 years living in Switzerland with him and our kids. I supported him for 10 years as a stay-at-home mom. And then I retrained as a life coach back then, when my youngest, who's my daughter's about 20, is about 20 now. She is 20. And she was about 3, I think, when I started that training. And in my early days, I was a health coach, helping women lose weight, build their self-esteem. That was something I knew how to do. And that led me into landing a corporate gig, big corporate deal in a major law firm. And people go, how did that happen? Well, the husband of one of the women that I was working with heard me and said, oh my gosh, I love your passion and your energy. Could you work with me? And I worked with him for 6 months, and he was like, I need to bring you into my firm because my partners need this. Like, they're burning out. They need somebody. And so we created the first ever peak performance coaching, virtual coaching program in a law firm. And I built a team around it, did that for about 4 years, had a lot of fun. Things happened inside the law firm. I lost the contract, and actually nearly found myself going bankrupt. I'd been riding high, not paying attention to the numbers, tolerating a whole host of things. I wasn't thinking like that back then, and realized that, I'd lost 85% of my revenue overnight, had bills, had a lifestyle that had increased. But again, my kind of business savvy had not kept pace with it, nor had my skills in business, because I knew nothing about marketing and sales. I was doing this all for like one big client. And so I was faced with this point where I had to really turn things around rapidly or close up shop. I mean, it really was. I was absolutely at that point. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because it was very humbling for a start. And that was a point where I really started to dig in deep into how had I kind of created that, right? I was fully responsible. I wasn't blaming. I knew that I was fully responsible for having created that situation. And I started to dig in deeper to, why that was and why I wasn't getting ahead and all the stories, and realized that, at the time I had a pretty dysfunctional relationship with money and numbers and everything related to kind of finance. I didn't look at the numbers. The money came in, it went out. I was not tracking things. I'd abdicated responsibility to my accountant. And because they only present things kind of like once a year, and then it's too late, right? And I was committed then to, really turning things around. And I also realized that I needed help. So in that year when things were falling apart, I hired a sales coach to teach me the fundamentals of selling, something I knew, again, nothing about, and had been winging it for, I didn't really have to do it, right? I had a contract and it landed in my lap. And so learned the fundamentals of sales and actually turned that business around. In the year I was going bankrupt, I actually replaced that same income with new clients outside of what I'd been doing. So I started to realize, okay, I'm on to something, right? I've got a lot of awareness. And at the point where I turned it around, and this was kind of then the next level of big awareness for me in terms of a toleration, was I realized that what I really wanted to be doing was playing a much bigger game. I was tolerating being in Switzerland. I actually was no longer feeling fulfilled there. My whole life was set up there. I felt like, I felt very stifled by the environment. It wasn't the entrepreneurial place that I wanted to play in. And I also realized the only reason I was there was because my husband was there, and the career, and that it was time for change. So at the point where I turned everything around, I actually started to get incredibly restless again and was looking for my next big move, and realized that I wanted to leave Switzerland. And that was the piece that started to get me on the path to coming to the States. So I had this big aha moment that, right, this is what I want. This is really where I want to be playing. I just have a huge challenge, because my husband has told me that, he loves me. I can do anything. But the one thing is never, ever ask him to leave Switzerland.
Wow. He said that to you?
He did.
Okay.
In our very early days, he said it once and it landed, and I heard it because he was very convicted around it. And I was like, Houston, we have a problem. And I've got 2 kids that are in schools and everything. And like, how is this gonna work out? But here again, and this, I share this because I think this is really important to hear. This was at a much, much deeper level. That realization, Brandon, for me was around a much deeper realization of the path that I was on, that was unconscious, that I was now choosing to change. I realized that my paradigm was one of being previously a stay-at-home mom, right, supporting a husband in his career, providing, if you like, supplementary income through my side hustle or my small business, right? You can see how I'm doing it even in quotation marks, because that's a lot of the stories and what's in society around this. And I also realized that, if I stayed on that path, that's the path I was going to go on. My life was going to look very similar 30 or 40 years out, right? I was on the path, and there were going to be incremental changes to it. And I needed to do something big in order to shift that.
Yeah.
And I needed, for me personally, I needed a massive shift in my environment to shift my environment so that my environment would support me and the dreams. Right?
And did that shift support what you were looking for?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I built, I actually got my husband on board. The story goes, we were actually in the States visiting. I presented it to him, like, this is really what I want to be doing. At this point, I was presenting it with a lot of conviction around why this was a really good idea. This wasn't just a whim. This was hey, I've got this vision. This is what I want for us. This is what I want for me. This is what I want for our future. This is why I think this is a really good idea. This is how I'm going to, this is how I'm prepared to make it work. And I laid out the emotional reasoning for it, the financial reasoning for it, the practical reasoning for it, and got him on board. And he was like, okay.
Wow.
I can see that you're serious about this. Kind of, let's do it. And what an incredible man, right? Just to support me in this. And then the plan was going to be 3 years. It was a 3-year plan that made sense to sell up everything, get kids out of school, then be at a right age, and for him to actually be finishing up his career in the UN. The only thing is once I got back to Switzerland, after having his yes, I was like, there's no way I can wait 3 years. Like, this is burning inside of me, this change. I'm ready, right? It comes back to the ready and the hunger. And I'm willing now to go for it. So I sold up everything, sold my house, closed down my business, got the kids out of school, and actually moved to the States, landed in a massive dust storm, and they closed the airport after me landing 11 months after that decision was made. 11 months.
So you essentially started over when you came to the States in a way.
It was a complete restart. So yes, when you ask about kind of like what got, that's why I say it's a long story, because this is a brand new business.
Yes.
This was a completely new concept. This wasn't what I was doing in Europe. In Europe, I was way more in leadership and executive development and the world of kind of peak performance in corporations. I had shifted when I talked about that time when I was shifting the business and kind of turning it around. I actually was still on the fence between some executive work back then and some small business owners that were just gravitating towards me. And I knew them in myself because they could see I was changing things in my own life and they're asking for advice. And I made the decision when I came to the States that this was a completely new audience, new programs, and brand new business.
And this is Business Growth Academy.
It was originally, when I started here, I was actually operating under my own name as a solopreneur. So it was vanessashaw.com. And then the Business Growth Academy has evolved in the last probably three-ish years, I think.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to ask you this. So I'm seeing 3 different, and I'm sure there's maybe more, but I'm seeing 3 different Vanessa Shaws here. I'm seeing Vanessa Shaw, who was in the performance and the leadership and the corporate setting in Switzerland, right? Where you weren't tracking your money, your income, those things, and you learned, and you learned lessons from that experience. And then I'm seeing the Vanessa who came over to the States, made a massive shift in environment and made a massive shift in business and was operating from your own personal brand. And now I see a Vanessa Shaw with Business Growth Academy. So if you had to sum up, what were the character and the mindset shifts that you had to make in order to go from Switzerland, Vanessa Shaw, to who you are now and doing what you're doing now? What were the biggest shifts there for you?
It's such a great question. And by the way, as well, in the book, The $1 Million Question, I do kind of outline some of these mindsets, because there are some key mindsets that come together that create that shift. And there's one that is the toughest of all. And it's the one where this is like, are you really willing to play bigger? Because this is the one that gets people. And I'm going to share with you. So
okay.
Whole philosophy of Vanessa Shaw, frankly.com, or Business Growth Academy for years has been, your business will only grow, frankly, your life, right, will only expand by the amount you're willing to grow yourself. Okay. So that's number one. That's like the premise of everything. But then the next piece is we have to hold ourselves to a higher standards, higher ideals, right? This is all about having bigger goals, being more aspirational in what we want, right? Holding ourselves to higher standards. What's the one mindset, there is one mindset in there that is the most difficult, and the one that people really struggle with is you must be willing to let go of things of a lower nature in order to get things of a higher nature. That's the one that people go cognitively, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like if I write that down on paper, that makes sense. And let's even talk about that, right? Because this is kind of where, people get, as I say, muddled up, and they're like, I want to get there, but I kind of want to hold on to everything I've got first to see if that I want is going to work. And now we've got 1 foot here and we've got 1 foot there, right? And we are completely, stretched, scattered, muddled. I mean, our attention is here, our attention is there. And there are times when it's like we absolutely have to let go. We have to cut the cord, and we have to really trust that that next step is going to come for us. I think about it. The reason I'm doing this in my hands is I think about it like a trapeze artist, right? We're swinging on that one trapeze. And in order to get to the next one, it's going to come close, and we've got to grab it and we've got to go with it. But we can't hold one and then go the other one, right? We know what that's going to look like in the middle, and we're going to crash. And that's the piece that for me, I was willing to, really let go of certain big things, right, in order to get to the next level. So, I had to let go. By the way, there was another Vanessa Shaw that you didn't talk about. That was the Vanessa Shaw housewife, Vanessa Shaw.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that was a massive letting go of that identity, because back then everything was tied up in that identity of me running the home and looking after my family. And I was very comfortable there. And by the way, I also did it really well. Going into business was such a new thing for me, and very unknown territory, and felt very scary for me, and very, it threw up a whole load of things for me. So I really had to let go of that version of me, and let's say integrate that version of me with, this is going to be Vanessa going into, let's say, solo practice, right? Then I had to let go of the, Vanessa is winging it in business identity that nearly caused me to go bankrupt, and now embrace that new identity of, I'm going to take this seriously. I am actually going to take this seriously. I'm going to start to read the books. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to enroll in programs that are going to help me learn those skills. And I'm no longer going to tell myself the story that I'm not good at math. I'm not good at numbers. These things are boring. I don't know finance. It's like, no, we're done with that, right? So that was a letting go of those stories. VanessaShaw.com, I think there was a lot of ego involved, honestly, in that brand. I mean, when I look back on it now, I wasn't necessarily aware of it. I don't always say that I'm somebody with a big ego per se, but this was I think it was like my coming out, right, of that, being inside corporate, and now I'm kind of coming out into this world of business, and I'm ready to operate and have my name out there, and this be my identity. And I did that for several years, and it was the Vanessa Shaw brand. And that was really great up until the point where I was like, actually, I don't want it to be about me anymore, right? I'm letting go of that. I want this to be about a team. I want it to be about a much bigger vision that, yes, I stand for, and yes, I'm leading, and I'm getting team on board, right? Well, that now involves letting go of control, right? Letting go of knowing everything that's going on in the business. I even had an example of one of my team members this week. She was like, can I have that email? It's one of our coaches. I see this email that goes out, and it'd be really good if that email is going out under me as well. It was just a very practical thing in the academy. And I said, I honestly have no idea what email you're talking about. And I said, I just don't know, these things. I said, I really don't know what you're talking about. Right? But back in the day, I would have known everything that was going on, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of that, letting go of, as I say, needing to control, building a team that supports, and moving forward. So, right now I would say there's the new identity of, of me, Vanessa Shaw, the human being, that's very much more around CEO, visionary, right? Really wanting to be way more visible, not for my brand, my personal brand, but for the mission of the academy, right? And that feels very, very different to, as I say, how we were operating several years ago.
What a story. I mean, there's so much we could unpack there, and I want to dive into a couple things specifically. And I love your thought process on building the team, right? Not just doing all these little things, not knowing which email it was sent from, because that's not your wheelhouse. That's not your unique ability. And I think a lot of business owners and leaders and entrepreneurs, they mistake how accessible a team is to them, especially in today's internet world where your team could be all over the world. You could outsource all the things you're not great at to someone who enjoys doing those things. And then you could build a real rock solid foundation for what you're doing. And what you said too, that stuck out to me, was you have to ditch the old you in order to acquire the new dreams and aspirations that you have. And there was a quote I heard a long time ago that I'm not sure who said it, but they said the person you are now is not the same you who is going to accomplish all of these aspirations and dreams that you have.
Yeah.
And what you're saying sounds like the exact same thing with identity and shifting it. And my question would be, when you went through these different identity shifts, was it a decision that you made in the moment and then everything changed from that decision in that moment? Or was it a drawn out process? How did you make those identity shifts? Because there must have been a lot of fear there. There must have been pain there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll think of a couple of stories even there. There've been times where it's shifted like rapidly, it's kind of like that decision, like I think the identity shift when I came across the Atlantic, like I swear that really happened on the flight. It was like that shifting of that environment. Now, to get to that point, though, to have made the decision, to do the plan, to make it all happen, of course, was a process. And honestly, for me, I actually felt very, very, very uncomfortable for a long time. I mean, really uncomfortable, and I could feel it in my body. And there was just this, this ickiness and this discomfort and this, trying to process what was going on and navigate between frankly, it was my desires and my fears, right? It was like, I really want to do this bigger thing. And it was this inner turmoil of, excuse me, all of the fears and the concerns that were around it, which of course are typically echoed by people that are close to you, right? When we've got those fears, of course, they'll show up in our environment as well. We have to pay attention to which ones are we listening to, right? And the desires or the fears. So I'd swear that one, the new identity really showed up, like as I landed here in Phoenix. I had another moment actually recently, which was around a part of the business, and this was inside the Business Growth Academy. So it wasn't even like the Vanessa as the, running the Business Growth Academy, but we had a program that we were running, that we've been running, generated a lot of money, generated great results for our clients. And I realized that I was actually tolerating that program. I was at a point where I was looking, I was feeling those tolerations coming up in my own business. And by the way, when we are tolerating things, one of the ways that we can find out that we're tolerating is our energy starts to get drained. Right? Tolerations are really sapping our energy. And oftentimes we don't know it. We start to feel flat. It's like, why am I not excited? Like, why haven't I got all of that new energy and creativity coming through us? And again, often we can look to like we're tolerating things that we don't realize and we need to make a change. And in my case, there was a year-long program, as I say, that had been hugely successful. And I really didn't realize at a surface level that I was tolerating it, tolerating the way it was run, tolerating what it required of me. And it was time to make a big change again. And the making of that change meant actually canceling something that has generated a lot of revenue for us. And by the way, was a huge part of our strategy moving forwards as well. So I'm like changing up the, everything that we're doing. And at the same time, it also required changing all of our marketing, all of how we were going to get clients. And when I made that change, I had no idea what was going to come next. My voice is just going to keep wanting to give.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was coming next. And that's one of those places where I say about you have to let go, grow, right? That was a massive identity shift again, right? Let's say an enhancement where now I'm really trusting the process of you have to let go to grow, even when you don't know what you're building next.
Yes.
Right? And that was I know that this needs to go. And I really trusted that I know how this works. Once I've let go, once we've kind of put it to bed, the next thing will emerge. And out of that emerged a 100-day business accelerator. I didn't know that at the time. I truly didn't. But it got me thinking about what is it that I'm really standing for right now? How can we get results quicker for our clients, right? These are small business owners. What if they don't have to do a year-long program? And frankly, what if we don't have to do a year-long program with all the whistles and bells and everything that we had? What if we could simplify and make it way better and way more exciting? And through that, we built, I built a 100-day business accelerator that took off in COVID, go figure. We've run, I think, 53 businesses through it today, and it's generated over 8.5 million for the businesses that have gone through it in a 100-day period. Right? The results are off the charts. It's something I'm hugely proud of. I'm hugely proud of these business owners that we're working with. We've had Brandon, we've worked with primarily women-owned businesses, and I will say a few really cool guys. Really But like we've had in COVID, businesses were being shut down, right? What's happened. It was just so, traumatic for small businesses. We've had women that have had to become breadwinners because, their partners and spouses were laid off work at the same time that they're having to homeschool kids and take their businesses seriously. And yet the results that are being generated in this is elite, our 100-day accelerator, are off the charts, right? But that, again, wouldn't have happened had I not followed that process of like digging into those tolerations, knowing where, again, my energy was going, being willing to let go in order to grow, and then trusting that that creativity was going to come through. And that was only it was like a 2-month process. When we talk about like the time of it, that happened really quickly. 2 months to shut down something and launch something new is not a long period of time, 60 days.
Yes. It sounds like it's because you were very focused on that at the time. And it sounds to me, just by listening to you, that you are just somebody who takes action. And even at the time in your life where you were studying languages and you didn't really know what the next chapter of your life looked like, you still did things, and you still did, took the contract with the UN. You still did all these other things and all these different chapters of your life. You haven't stood still. You've kept doing. And even when you didn't know what the next step was, you did something. And by doing that something, you found the adjacent opportunity.
Always. And that absolutely is. That's the pattern. That's the truth. I have never stopped. And as you say, I've never stood still. There are times when I wish I could, right? You sort of go, oh, if only I could stop. But that's not how it works, right? It's really not how it works. And taking imperfect action, right, is really important, because it's taking imperfect action. And I say imperfect, messy action, not being attached to, oh my gosh, is this the right next move? Well, what about I just experiment, right? And do something and trust that, as you say, that adjacent opportunity will present itself. And then when you do that long enough, I get it that feels scary when somebody's starting out, right? When they're starting out. And that's when I often say now, I've just got a lot of leverage and a lot of confidence with our clients. I'm like, I've done this for so long. We've worked with thousands of people at this point. I know that you're scared, but will you trust me that like we know what we're doing and we know how this works. And that, most times if they're scared, they're like, yeah, I just needed to hear that. Like, so let's go, right? But then when people are in that process and they're studying it for themselves and really understanding the internal changes that happen to create, right, those external dreams and in goal achievement, they build the confidence as well. Like, okay, I get it. Yeah, this is how it works.
Yes. And then when you start seeing those small wins, it just compounds and builds from there. And I want to talk about, the difference in the landscape since COVID. A lot of businesses didn't survive, but a lot of them did, and a lot of them thrived. And many of them started during that time last year, and now they're thriving even more. And I guess my question for you would be, what's the top difference that you've seen between the landscape now post-COVID than the landscape during COVID? And how is that an advantage to entrepreneurs who are looking to grow and scale during this post-COVID season?
Gosh, I know, it's such a great question. I mean, there was so much fear, right? And fear and panic. I mean, we'd launched this new thing, I mean, right at the beginning, and I was like, oh wow, and now COVID, right? It was like we, made that move, and then that COVID, right, hit. And we were literally launching our second cohort of a brand new program on March the 17th, which is the day everything went crazy, here in Arizona and frankly, most of the States. So there was a lot of panic and uncertainty, and there were all those conversations around pivot back then. And the reality is, for a lot of business owners, first and foremost, we had to get beyond the fear. Right, but that was the first place back then through the pandemic. Was like, let's really look at this practically. Like, have you got a business that is actually being shut down right now because you've got people walking through a door? And that's very different to somebody that's got a business where technically their business, they're closed, like in their location, but they could still provide their services online, right? So those things were very different, right, for the businesses that we were working with. So for some of those, that was about, adapting their business, moving to online, frankly, a lot of it was just about a different way to market and a different way to deliver. And so much of actually what they were doing, their core services, didn't change. They really didn't. And once they got their head around that, it was like, you're not being stopped. It's just those mechanisms that have changed. And by the way, I've been running a virtual business for years. Like, we are perfectly positioned to help you here. We were doing Zoom way before Zoom was fashionable. So that was kind of during, right, the pandemic. Now, the other thing I think that was going on as well during the pandemic in terms of mindsets was, people are scared, there's no money, they're being laid off, people aren't buying. Like, I can't sell, right, in this kind of, in this environment. It was like, no, people have still got problems, right? That didn't go away. And some of those problems have been really exacerbated now because of the pandemic. So don't be tone deaf to what's going on. And this is now a place of deep understanding and empathy and real relationships. And frankly, if your sales skills weren't that honed before, they need to be now, right? Mm-hmm. There's a different sensitivity around it, but problems haven't gone away and solution seekers haven't gone away, right? So now, when we look at kind of where we're coming out of this, I like to think that we're post-pandemic. Are we? Being from Europe, they're still in the throes of it. So, but I do feel like we are in a different phase of that intensity, right? Especially here in the States, things are opening up again. I mean, in Arizona, things are very, very normal right now. But I think what's happened post-pandemic is people are, or let's say in this phase of it, people have questioned what's important to them. Right, there's been a lot of introspection. There's been a lot of questioning what's really important. We've discovered things about relationships. We've discovered that, who are the people that are really close to us because we've missed them, and we've built closer ties in the pandemic. We've also had a lot more, people have experienced a lot more free time. They've been working from home. They've been able to kind of build a lifestyle around certain things. I mean, for myself, we didn't travel at all in that year, and I'm a big traveler, but yet again, I'm very picky now about getting on a plane and where I'm going to travel to, because there's a certain part of travel that's a darned inconvenience.
Yes.
It is. And I'm, as I say, we're big travelers. So questioning those things. So I think there's a bigger, element about building businesses and tapping into what's really important for us. And that would be my advice to people, is like, use those lessons that you've learned in that pandemic and keep building on them. Don't look for, when are we going to go back to what it was before? Right. I think that, the pandemic per se has given us this amazing opportunity to see that we can do things differently. You don't need to meet in person with your clients. But I've had so many of our clients say that, like, oh my gosh, I used to drive all over town. I used to do all these in-person meetings. I'm thinking that I wouldn't go back to doing that. I'm like, why would you go back to doing that?
Yes. Yes.
Why would you? It doesn't make sense, right? But again, that was an old school way of doing things. So I think, for me, that's the big gift, is in terms of those lessons learned, how we can do things differently. And for a lot of people as well, they might have been working in the local market because they were doing so much face-to-face. Well, this means that, you've got a whole market, a whole world that has potentially opened up, right? So the geography as well has been massively expanded for a lot of business owners.
And I think something else about you too, you've answered all these questions with incredible answers, with your own personal story, going deep into your different identity shifts. I think it's important to also just watch you and listen to what you're saying in a different way, because you are extremely optimistic about the future. And I think that's very important for everyone listening to understand, and I'm sure they do. But you have shifted and changed with all of these landscapes. You didn't say things like, well, this is the way that I've always done it, right? You might have said that at one point, but then you decided, I'm going to change this. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to look for a new opportunity. I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to let go so that I can grow. I think that the mindset that you exhibit is so incredibly powerful, and the positivity that you exude is incredible. You have amazing energy. And for everyone listening, in the description, click to go to Vanessa's website. It's thebusinessgrowthacademy.com. And on the website, you'll find her book, The $1 Million Question. Download the book. I started to read the book actually this morning. I went through a good amount of it, and it's just an incredible read. She outlines everything that she's talking about right now. She goes into deeper detail on absolutely everything. And it's a free download. Go and grab the download. See if it resonates with you. And if it does, you can take it even further and learn more from Vanessa. But I'm super curious, Vanessa, what's next for you on this journey of growth?
Yeah. And, again, it's back to that positivity and optimistic. I am, and here's the thing, I think people get burnt out and they lose energy when they're not building that bigger, bolder future for themselves, right? It's like we run out of future. And when we run out of future, we run out of energy. And so for me, that's always about, like, I'm always working on the what's next, right? The bigger vision. That 3-year vision is, mapped out. We're obviously in it right now. And that's really important for anybody. Like, don't start to run out of future, right? That's where our energy can get drained. What's next for me is something that I am hugely passionate about and very excited. It's part of the reason, of building the team and kind of structuring the business. So again, we can, build this other brand that I'm working on without me having to go crazy. But again, it comes back to my passion of helping women build financial security through their business. And I launched a podcast. It has been on hiatus just for a couple of months here, because we've been making so many changes internally, but it's about to go live again. And the podcast is called Get Rich Without Being a Bitch.
Yes.
It's my, my biggest passion, right now. And it speaks to a lot of the core changes, honestly, that I had to make in myself through my identity, through those mindset shifts, because I really believe deep down inside that I had to be some cold-hearted bitch to get ahead in business. And that was an identity. We've been talking about identity today, right? That was an identity, Brandon, I did not want. And frankly, who would, right? Really and truly. And so hence the podcast has been born out of that. We are building a whole new brand. out of that, I've got a developer working on the brand. There will be a program that supports it. This is kind of the big piece that we're going out in the world with. We've got a PR agency working with us on that as well. And as you can hear, I feel massively excited and passionate about it. And it's where I want to be absolutely transforming, the conversation and the bank accounts, frankly, the conversation in women's minds and the bank accounts of women business owners globally. Like it's time to change, and it's time to create a massive change.
That's incredible. Congratulations on that transition, by the way. And I know you already have, but I know you're going to impact even more women and everybody else who listens to that podcast as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. So Vanessa, where can we connect with you after this chat today? Where's the best place to find you and follow you?
Absolutely. So as you said, the $1 million question, we'll put that in the downloads here as well. It's a great book. It only takes about 90 minutes to read as well. So I'm a short read person, so I wrote a short book. Businessgrowthacademy.com as well. That's a kind of a main home. If people are interested in our programs, there's ways to connect with us there as well. And then, of course, online, I also have my own Facebook group. It's, fairly small and intimate, called the $1 Million Group. So you can find me in a Facebook group there, and also on Instagram and all the other places, and LinkedIn.
Awesome. Very cool. We'll throw some of those links in the description so you guys can check them out. Go check out Vanessa. Go to her website, get the $1 Million Question, and continue to follow her because she's only getting started on this journey. And Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us today and for all your insights and for sharing your story as well. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Brandon. It's been a lot of fun for early in the morning.
Absolutely. Thank you. What a conversation with Vanessa Shaw from the Business Growth Academy. We talked about her journey through business and entrepreneurship and everything in between. We talked about what she's working on next. We talked about identity shifts and scaling your business from 6 figures to multi-6 figures and even to 7 figures and beyond. We covered a lot in this hour, and I hope you all took some nuggets of information away from this as well. Again, in the description, click the link to go to the Business Growth Academy. Get Vanessa's $1 Million Question. It's a 90-minute read. I'm a short read guy too. I like going through something quick, but it's a 90-minute read that will yield incredible results. Thank you for joining us. And you always ask, the number one way that you can support the Be Better broadcast is to share this episode with one other person who needs to hear this information, one other business owner or leader or entrepreneur or looking to be an entrepreneur. Share this with them, but only if you took away value, only if this information has helped you and has inspired you to start your morning and your day strong. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.